That is a fine title. All right. I don't use StreamYard. I haven't used it. I'm told that it's easier, but I'm both an old dog and averse or allergic to new tricks, so that makes it difficult. We are live. I'm posting a link to Twitter really fast into my locals, but other than that, that's it. How are you doing, Jodi? Jodi Shaw. We got Jodi Shaw here. How are you, Jodi Shaw? Jodi Shaw.
Well, I'm okay. I'm here in lovely Northampton. Beautiful environs, natural.
Virus. I love that.
A
Okay.
lot of masked humans, and,
Yep.
but the nature is unmasked and still on display.
Oh, I like that. I like that. Um, why is it that it's weird how like this isn't what I planned on asking you, but you just said a thing. Let me actually I'll give a bit of a preference, not preference, an explanation. My full attention is here now. I just got done typing links into locals and Twitter. For why we're doing this live stream. So for people who are watching, Jodi and I had an amazing conversation. I enjoyed it anyway. I don't want to speak for Jodi, but had a great conversation. What was that, a couple weeks ago? And my 2-year-old's up. And like we talked and I went back and I'm like, wow, we ended up having a hard stop that I didn't know about. And that's your fault. And I'm still mad at you. I'm just kidding. So, and like we hit this hard stop just as I was like, hey, Jodi, I want to hear your thoughts on stuff. How are you doing? And she's like, I got to go in 5 minutes. And I'm like, what the? So I want to pick Jodi's brain and I'm going to try to not talk as much. So that's why we're doing this. But one of the things that I hadn't planned on asking you about, but what you just said made me think of like how much COVID has changed just how we think about our environment and and by environment, I mean like our surrounding environment, not like the environment, but and like how like one of the first things you said was there's a lot of masked people here. And I know that's probably related to the text that you just got or whatever, but it probably also is a thing that you would think about. Like I have family that like all of our family basically lives in Kansas City. And I've told people that I don't like going back to visit there because it's so different than where I live. Like my wife's grandparents are here now. So we have a newborn and they're here to see him. And they were talking about how there's all these restaurants that they don't like a lot, if not most in Kansas City still don't do indoor dining, at least in the part where they're at. And, we ordered some food last night and we went up to this place where it's like no servers are wearing masks. The bartenders aren't. Like people are in there watching Monday Night Football, hanging out. Like it's just normal. And like how, like I had forgotten where I'd put my mask. I had to find them because before our son was born, we were like going back into the hospital and stuff for visits. And I'm like, oh, I have to have this for being in here. But I just was used to not wearing it and not being around people where that was a thing. And that's one of the reasons why I don't like going back to, like, I contrast those two. Like I didn't have that heuristic in my mind, 2 years ago of there versus here. But now it's like COVID has risen to the top of how we think, like contrast our surroundings with other places.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So it's getting into our head now. I mean,
Oh, it
before,
totally is.
like, well, to very oversimplify it, but like blue area, red area, like that whole
Sure.
blue state, red.
Yeah.
It's now like getting in, like viscerally inside. Like,
Yeah.
I want to go to that area because then I have to do da 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 da, and it's
Yep.
like I can't really enjoy myself, and I can't really connect. And also, I will say, vibe wise, it doesn't really feel like it feels like the community is there's not really much here for me,
Yeah.
the
Real,
community versus like
yeah.
the other places where people are still getting together and
Living
dancing.
their lives.
Yeah, Yeah, and talk and being able to see each other's expression when they talk, and
Yep.
um, even the Zoom thing. I won't go off on the Zoom tangent, but I actually had an experience on Saturday where I went to Emily Burns' house. She's running for fourth congressional district for Massachusetts for
Very
Congress.
cool.
Yeah, on an anti-mandate kind of platform. I don't know what you call it. Freedom,
Well,
basically.
yeah. I
Just
would say normal, but that definition has changed too.
right, freedom, just freedom.
Yeah.
And I spoke. I'm trying to like speak a lot about trying to connect the woke and the vax and COVID stuff for people, because there's a lot of, especially in blue area, like there's a lot of disconnect. Like there are people in blue areas who are very who are anti-mandate and understand the implications of what this means if we allow this to happen, but yet don't understand what's wrong with anti-racism, so that I just started speaking about that topic because nobody's really like drawing that connection for people. Anyway, I spoke in front of a live audience for the first
Oh,
on this topic. Well, on like as Jodi Shaw, former Smith College employee,
right,
basically.
right.
The first time, as opposed to like Zoom. Well, as opposed, actually, as I said, I did speak in person with Tucker, but you know what I mean. Like it was in front of an audience.
Yep.
Totally different experience.
Yep.
It was amazing, and I felt so like I was in it with the audience, and I was able to speak in a way that we were feeding off of each other's
Hmm.
like normal, versus the
Nice.
flat screen. It's very nice having this conversation with you, but I imagine it would be so much richer if it were in person. And
Sure.
just
Yeah.
and the mass, I mean, it's having this effect on our communities that's just it's not quantifiable, I guess. Maybe some social psychologist someday will be able to, so I mean, I think people are attempting to quantify it and present it as data, but it's very obvious to me that it's how damaging it is to communities. Um,
Yeah.
and now
The
mention getting in our heads, like we don't even want to go to those places.
Yeah, and and they feel the same way, right? Like ask a person who's still living in New York if they want to go hang out in Florida or Texas. They're gonna be like, I'll get space aids if I go there. They're a bunch of plague bearers, you know? Like I think about it the way I always the, the what my mind has been drawn to in terms of how I think about it is whenever I go back and visit family and I'm in, this kind of metropolitan hive mind area, is it feels like it reminds me of whenever I was in high school. Me and some friends went to the Renaissance Fair, and the Renaissance Fair is like all of these people, in costume, pretending a certain thing about reality, and it's fine for a while, but the longer, at least for me, the longer I'm at the Renaissance Fair, the more I'm like, I want to get back out into the real world. And if you try to inject the real world into the Renaissance Fair, they will kick you out. Like if you're like, hey, this isn't real. That's called being an asshole, by the way. I know that from experience. I was not a very nice kid. But they'll kick you out for raining on their delusion parade. And the thing with the Renaissance Fair is it has like a stop time. The Renaissance Fair is from this time to this time, and so the people who are part of that performance have signed up for it, right? And they've agreed to it. But for me, whenever I'm in the city or I'm at these places where they want me to go along with the delusion, I'm like, look, I'm all into theater, but I didn't audition for this part, right? Like I didn't audition for this performance, and I'm not part of this play. I'm not in the Renaissance Fair, and I don't want to be here anymore. I'm not going to participate. Like it's like I'm in the middle of a flash mob that's doing some kind of play or something, and I don't want to do it, and I can't do it. And it's soul sucking to do the performative thing for a long duration of time. And so it's like that's how it feels. I'm like, I don't want to go back to the Renaissance Fair. I don't want to go back to the COVID Ren Fair whenever I go to the city, because I'm so used to freedom where I'm at now. You know what I mean? So I don't want to go there, and I'm sure that the Blue and On people don't want to come here, you know, which is fine. But that's changed
Perfect
everything.
analogy. That is so, that so captures it. And that's how I felt at Smith.
Yeah.
Felt like I was in, and I think I said it in my first, like it was like they were, there's a script. There's
Yep.
a script, and we're all following the script. And I'm like, and we're calling it authentic conversations about
Right.
racism. And I'm like, that's the name of the play.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone has their part. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
You don't get to pick your part.
Yep.
Your part is assigned to you.
Yep. Like you're in high school,
Yes,
you know,
I
but you're in theater class and you're bad. Like, no, you're a tree. You're gonna be a tree. But I want lines. If I have to be in this thing, I want to be able to have some lines and say what I want to say. No, you're a tree. You will listen. You will do your part and listen. You're here to listen. You're a tree. And if you screw it up, then you're going to be in trouble if you screw up your part.
yeah. And
So
directors were not open to suggestions.
that's right. That's right.
Actors.
Um, so I want to ask you about that because one of the things you said, and I still have the note, the post-it note stuck to my computer from our last conversation was, and I just wrote, "Where's the surge?" Because you talked about how you named your Twitter handle Smith Surge because you were expecting, you know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but my understanding was you were expecting like you to be the first of many
Yeah.
to come forward and talk about this thing. And I don't want to rehash everything that happened at Smith, but I do want to talk about like your experience, like emotionally and like just psychologically, what that's been like for you. You know, clearly you had an expectation of what was going to happen in terms of like friends and colleagues you had and what their response was going to be. Maybe people that supported you in conversations as this was going on. You're like, okay, I'll be the first to step out and it'll become easier for number two. And then two makes it easier for three, and three makes it easier for four, and so on and so forth. But then it's like, you know, instead, you know, everyone step forward at the same time. Who's, you know, going to fight? And then the one person steps forward and it's like, oh, what the I thought you guys, what's going on? And how like I had a similar thing with what happened to me with the school system here, and how that really to this day, like I realized maybe this was maybe like 6 or 7 months ago. Like I was just out for a walk, and I realized I'm like, I've got a lot of anger. I've got a lot of anger and resentment for the people who I trusted and who I thought were my friends and abandoned me. And I think it's actually like corroding me inside. And I like ended up just spending a super long time just like praying about it. I'm like, God, I don't want to feel like this, like towards these people. And like, and it's been a process since having that realization of like, of fighting that anger. And, you know, it's like, man, I trusted these people and we were friends, and they know that this is wrong. So like, you know what I mean? And that's like, that was one of the things that made, I was telling you before we started recording, like 2020 so hard for me was the relational stuff. And that feeling of like abandonment and broken trust, not just with the institution, though that was part of it, but with the people, the relationships that I had. And so like for you of just like, you know, that same kind of thing of like, where's the surge? Like I thought you guys, I thought we we're on the same page here. Same team. We're team truth. We're team doing what's right for the students. We're team facts, right? We're team like what, at least what I understood was morality. And then to feel alone in that is very hard. So I mean, to whatever degree you can speak to that, and just like that, you know, kind of that clip that we watched before we went live, you know, of just like, you know, there is a difference between the physical rewards and the kind of emotional, spiritual rewards of telling the truth. And they are often not even remotely the same, right? There's
Yeah,
not a lot of physical reward for being a truth teller today.
expect material reward. What was the quote again? You can't
It was, you
expect.
can't expect the material reward of success to follow the spiritual reward of telling the truth. So for people who are watching, the context is Curtis Yarvin tells this story about this communist in the 30s who is dedicated to the cause, marries a Russian guy, moves to the Soviet Union with him, has a little baby, and then he gets thrown off into the gulags. She comes back and is trying to get her friends, like, I need your help. Like, my husband is in the gulag, like, help do something. And because she was saying bad things about Russia, they all abandon her. And she finally finds this one person who will listen to her. And the person, you
A
know,
mythologist, I think that's important. A
yeah,
myth, Edith Hamilton.
yeah, Edith Hamilton. Yes, yes, exactly. Edith Hamilton tells her, you can't expect because she's wanting to know, why are all my friends abandoning me? Like, I'm telling the truth. Like, this is wild. And Edith Hamilton says, you can't expect the physical rewards of success to come along with the spiritual rewards of telling the truth. And so it feels like that is really similar. Yeah, obviously not the same. I'm not like mapping either of our experiences onto this woman whose husband was just like gone. And, but there's a certain feeling that kind of comes along with that abandonment while you're for telling the truth. Um, so yeah, to whatever degree, take that wherever you want. But that's one of the things of like the where's the surge has just stuck with me from our last conversation. I've just wanted to kind of tease that out of what that's been like for you.
Wow, it's been quite a journey, Truman. Notice how she was talking about her friends and material. That's part of it. I mean, becoming unemployable, of course, is part of it.
Super
But
fun.
but the friendship or the community part, to see that as a material reward. Uh, there are spiritual rewards though that do balance it out. And I think that's the real separation. That's the whole reason. It's you're asking someone to make that choice. And it feels like, well, of course I'm going to choose to tell the truth while when you're not actually asked to do it. Like you say, oh yeah, of course I would tell the truth. Of course
Mm.
I'll be with you and I'll stand with you or whatever. And then when it comes time to actually do it and you realize what's at stake, you realize all those material things like, oh, actually now it's getting real. Like I'm at the precipice. I think
Yeah.
that's when people you just don't you just don't know what you're going to do until you're actually there.
Is that like that Mike Tyson quote? Everyone has a plan till they get punched in the face.
I love that quote.
Yeah. I'm
That's
pretty sure it's Tyson.
There's something that I don't know why this it's not quite well, let's stick to this. Yeah, so yeah, a lot of people I confided, and that was actually part of my process. Was I felt like you said, where I was in like this play, and I was like, wait a minute, this doesn't feel authentic. It feels like I'm being asked to read a script. Like you're telling me to speak words, and you're telling me what words you want me to speak. Like, and it kind of even all feels so. Part of my process was I needed to check in with other people to make sure I wasn't crazy. 'Cause
Mm.
I felt like there's this gaslighting, I was like,
Yep.
am I crazy? Like, what?
Yeah.
And at first it was like, am I racist? Am I
Right. Yeah.
upholding white supremacy? 'Cause I'm secretly having these doubts about the script.
Yep.
Uh, that was the first thing. And then I had to check in with other people. Like we're social animals. Like I just can't imagine. I think about people who speak out or speak the truth without having any means of validating that or checking in with other people. I can't even imagine that. So I had to check in with other people, and I did. I checked in with a lot of people at Smith College, behind closed doors, one on one, and every single person that I approached. Now, granted, I approached them because I thought I already had kind of a relationship with them, and I thought, they might be I didn't like obviously go and check in with like the mightiest social justice warrior, scream.
You didn't ask their opinion.
No,
That was your problem. They would have cleared this right up for you.
all right.
Yes, you are racist.
Yeah. So anyway, I checked in with a lot of people, and it was like the same. Some of them were really, I don't think had even ever talked about it out loud. Some were like, yeah, it's nutso, whatever. I just deal with it and go home. Like it didn't
Yeah.
seem to bother them that much, but a lot of people it bothered them. And they were like, well, one person was like, well, but nobody will speak out, and another person was like, well, I might anonymously do something. And um it because it's hard when you know as you're in a play that you didn't agree. You step into a play and you're like, okay, now you're in the play, you're commanded to be in this play as a condition of your employment. So yeah, when I did speak out, I did expect that it would embolden and encourage others at Smith to do the same. What happened was very interesting. The people that I had been speaking with kind of disappeared, and my theory is that that's a guilt by association thing,
Yep.
because I wouldn't have, or maybe it was fear that I would betray them. I don't know, like I would somehow publicly, like now I'm very public, and oh my gosh, she might mention my name. But I feel like it's more than just like a guilt by association. Like they're worried that any continued association with me, that the college would like pick up on, could pick up on somehow, would, I mean, this is a small town too, would endanger their livelihood. So I think that's my theory. But it's interesting because other people that I didn't even know before from Smith College reached out to me. And I've had many, many conversations with them as well.
Mm.
Some of those people are they don't, they do speak about it, but not well, I can't get too much into that, but I will say that I did find other people. So now we have even more people. I've got even more people that I know who are at Smith College who very much don't like this stuff
Mm.
and by it, but won't uh, come out and like endorse me or anything, you know?
Naturally.
So
The thought that I had whenever you're saying that was, it feels like people have like endless sympathy until it becomes costly, like until it demands action from them. Like they're like endlessly like, yeah, this is bad, yeah, this is wrong. But the minute it's like, hey, there's a really simple thing you could do to help, but it might be uncomfortable. It's like, and
it's like that with social justice warriors too, where
totally, yeah, the slacktivists.
talk, blame, 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 blame. And then somebody like Bob Woodson, like an actual civil rights leader from the civil rights era, comes along and says, let's go into this community.
Let's go do something.
This, where are they?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it's maybe that's just a human lazy thing. Like you like to feel like you're doing something. Also, people need to work this out too. It takes a long time for people to work this shit out. It's like a
Yeah.
form of brainwashing, and it took me a long time to work it out. So I don't want to, you know, yeah, is there cowardice? Yeah. There's cowardice everywhere. We know that throughout history. But also people are at different places in terms of working it out. I will say that there has been a surge in people talking about, for lack of a better word, critical social justice is Helen and James's word, but I call it woke ideology.
Yep.
I'm of the people. There has been a surge in people talking about that.
Yep.
I can't attribute it to me or my video. I think it was just the right, it's the time. It's this post George Floyd. Suddenly everybody's like, what? Hold, wait a minute. Like,
Yeah.
oh God, now we're in this play. And so it was just kind of like this. There was a wave in 2020, but it wasn't at Smith College. So I was just one of many in this wave. But unfortunately, there was never like a wave at one particular institution. And I wonder if, like, for example, Wellesley, let's take Wellesley College. If like 12 people suddenly all came out together at Wellesley College and said, we're not going to do this anymore. I wonder what would, like, I wonder if others, the hundreds of others, would be emboldened to stand up and say, yeah, I'm not either. It seems
Yeah.
like we're actually, it's oddly enough, we're seeing that a lot more with the mandates. We're seeing like large groups of people. at institutions and banding together and saying no. And yeah, go ahead and fire me then. And that's interesting because people are talking about CRT a lot, but with the mandate stuff, they're actually doing it. They're saying no, and they're filing lawsuits. We have way more lawsuits against the mandates than we do about CRT.
Did you so you said Wellesley, and it made me think of, I think it was Wellesley or Wesleyan. They're one of the two there, and I think UMass is one of them, where they're requiring boosters for the students to come back in spring semester.
I think UMass is requiring them. I think I heard
It's
that.
NPR did an article about it because it had this line in it that was really fascinating to me. Um, where what do you say? Uh, okay, here it is. Requiring the booster makes it a social norm rather than an individual decision. The majority of our people would have gotten the booster without the encouragement, he says, but we want to get the rate up as high as possible. And so the line about that with the college students of just like, we want it to become a social norm rather than an individual decision. Most people would do this anyway, but we're worried about the minority who wants to make an individual decision for themselves, and we want to force compliance. We're worried about the people who want to be individuals.
Why are we worried?
And that just stuck with me. Man, what was the I can't I have the screenshot. For some reason my phone saves the originals in a different folder than after I edit it, but that's just stuck with me of just like, yeah, these places, they probably would, those students are going to get the boosters anyway because the universities are lost as far as I'm concerned. And so it's like they're going to do that, but there is still going to be this minority of students who are like thinking for themselves, and they're like, we have to take care of that as well. And they're acquiring the booster. And so like, I don't know, I think there's staff that are fighting back against it, but there's like the practices they use are a really good culling mechanism, right? Like they cull people out like you,
Mhm.
they cull people out like me. Like, I don't know if you saw this in New York City, just that, they're requiring vaccines for anyone to be employed and for kids 5 and up. Did you see this?
In New York,
In New York,
it was.
vaccine mandates for anyone who's employed by a private business. So
Oh,
anyone to be
I saw that.
employed, that's yesterday, and for children 5 and up to go into places to do stuff. And so it's like, I think it was 45% of the black population, 40% of the white population, and like 30 something percent of the rest of the population. But then I also see an article today on NBC where it's like they're making it easier that like they're doing a thing where people who aren't citizens can vote in their elections. So it's like they're culling all of these people out, but then they also have a plan to like fill that void, with, I guess illegal immigrants, which I know that sounds like some like white supremacy conspiracy theorist. I'm not talking about that from a racial standpoint. I'm just saying from like a bodies in the city standpoint, you know what I mean? And so they're culling people out who are sane, and they're replacing them with the kids that like with our own kids by indoctrinating them, right? And in the institutions or through other methods, I guess. But they're really good at sifting the same people out, I guess is my point, and further hermetically sealing off their echo chambers.
So why do you think that is? Because do you think the minority? I was reading about this in Austria. So, one of these, Italy now. My yeah, so somebody I know just messaged. She lives in Rome and is kind of freaked out.
She should be.
Apparently, she can't go into a bank. She tried to go into a bank, and the bank was like, "No, you can't. We need to see your pass thing." And she's not.
Oh, a vaccine passport to get into a bank.
Yeah,
Wow.
I hadn't seen that in any headlines or like
Well, of
I know
course not.
Italy can't go to a restaurant, like the leisure stuff. But that maybe this particular bank just took it upon itself, her bank, to say no, we're only vaccinated people can come in here. Um, yeah, but I forgot what we were talking about.
You said, why do you think, and then you didn't finish your
Oh, why
thought.
do you think? Yeah, so let's say you have a population that's 90% compliant with whatever rule is at hand, because now it's clearly, we can talk about the vaccine or masks, but clearly it doesn't matter. Like it could be anything, right? Like you're not speaking this,
Yes.
you're not pledging allegiance, you're not signing this thing or whatever it is. Um, why are they concerned about the 10%? Why do
Um,
why do they
be,
need?
because it's not about the people, it's about um the information. It's about what those people represent,
A
which
threat?
is dissent. Those people represent, huh?
So these people represent a threat.
Yeah, and the threat is dissent or the potential for dissent. So there's this quote from The Road to Serfdom that I love that I think explains this a lot. And he wrote this in the 30s, and then the book was published in the early 40s. But he says, do and facts and theories must thus become no less the object of an official doctrine than views about values. And the whole apparatus for spreading knowledge, the schools and the press, radio and motion picture, will be used exclusively to spread those views which, whether true or false, will strengthen the belief in the rightness of the decisions taken by the authority. And all information that might cause doubt or hesitation will be withheld. The probable effect on the people's loyalty to the system becomes the only criterion for deciding whether a particular piece of information is to be published or suppressed. And so it's like there's this thing that there's a system that has a plan. We have a plan, we have a system, we have a goal, whatever. And anything that represents something that could even like that's in this chapter 11 of The Road to Serfdom is called The End of Truth. And the whole chapter is quote worthy. And he has this whole thing where it's like there are people who will dissent, and so those are the people that they're most worried about, not because they're worried about those people actually doing anything, but they're worried about those people injecting alternatives to the plan, to the decree of the powers that be, into the minds of others, of them going, wait, there's an alternative perspective here. Like it's not just this one thing. And
So
so I think that's why they represent something that could cast doubt on the legitimacy. I mean, this is the thing that we see, right? Is that these institutions are first and foremost about supporting their own legitimacy and the legitimacy of the people who are in power within those institutions. Everything else is secondary to self-preservation. And so anyone who says that's a really stupid idea, or that doesn't work, or that's fascist, dude, like what are you talking about? You can't force this stuff, represents a threat to their legitimacy, because all they're saying is no. And anytime, I mean, think about it with your kids. Whenever your kids tell you no, that is a direct assault on your legitimacy as a valid authority in their lives. It is. I had my daughter at she goes to this place where it's like tumbling and like playing around and on this like kind of equipment. It's like an ultimate or a ninja warrior gym actually, and she goes once a week. And I took her last week and she didn't want to go play, and she's like no. And I'm like, what'd you say? You know what I mean? And so it's like that's a direct like assault on my legitimacy as the authority of her life whenever she says no. And that has to be dealt with. Like it's like, no, you can't tell me no, like not right now. This is not, we're not having debates about this stuff. And so, but they see it the same way. They see themselves as absolute authority over us that can't be questioned or challenged. And so anything that even symbolically represents no or even question mark, like, are you sure? Even are you sure? Or tell me more about that. Or I have questions. Like you said before, like you can't even ask questions. Anything that represents that represents in their mind an attack on the legitimacy of their power.
I'm going to take that one step further
Do
because
it.
somebody somebody's in power, right? They're in power. Let's put them up here. And some little person questions them. That's a lot. And I suspect that that's not the actual threat. The threat is that person will cast out in the minds of the followers of the power, right? It's not the
Yeah.
direct threat. It's a lateral threat.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. Precisely.
That the 10% will cause some of the 90, or some, or maybe even all of the 90%,
Precisely.
and then they will lose their followers or lose
Yeah.
their underclass or whatever it is. I mean, there's, you know, class stuff. They'll lose their, not just their underclass or their labor or their workers, but like their exploitables. They're
It's a
raw.
horizontal threat, not a vertical one, like you said. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Right, but once the horizontal threat, if it takes root, then it's a vertical.
Exactly. Yep. Yep.
That's that's really, I think, fear is, right? They don't. So this is what I'm wondering: if that 10% of people, I'm just throwing that number. I don't know if it's 10%.
I definitely think it's less than that, but I understand what
It's
you
less
can say.
than
It's
that.
approximately right.
I I think it might even be like 2 or 3%. But
Yeah, probably. I bet you. Here's a fun stat that just came to my mind. Actually, finish your thought, and then I'll
well,
go ahead.
I think I'm wondering if those, if that 10, let's call it 10, if that 10% of people were like, okay, fine, we're just gonna go over here and we're gonna do our thing. You guys do you. We're gonna we're just gonna go over here and we're not gonna bother you anymore. We're not gonna ask to use your stuff. We're not gonna like, we won't even like take any resources. We're just gonna go do our own thing. I don't know, in the mountains somewhere. Then would that be a threat? Well, I mean, because a
Oh
lot of
yeah,
people are going to Mexico. Wait, why would it be a threat? Why would it still be a threat?
it's a
Because
huge threat.
distance.
Why does the government in China censor stuff on the internet, and why is the internet completely blocked in North Korea?
Well, I mean, what if, I don't know. Why is it?
Because it's you can't have a contrast, even if it's not a contrast actively seeking to be a contrast. The presence of something different than what you're doing represents a contrast, an alternative, even just symbolically to the people who are under you.
Even if it's existing and it's totally like away,
Yes.
like,
Yes. They cannot have test cases. They cannot allow for there to even be an experiment.
but like not even on the internet, completely without any
Well,
means
it
of.
will be on the internet. I mean, if it's always going to be, it represents a threat. It does. That's why, again, why is the internet blocked in North Korea?
But that's what I'm saying, Truman. Like, if that 10% was like, we're not going to use your tools, okay? We're going off the internet. We don't have any.
Well,
We don't have any electricity. We're just going to go over here in our cave. Do your thing. I'm wondering, well, how could those 10% possibly be a threat at that point?
they still would be. That's how these people think. This is smart. They're smart. The people in power have maintained, like, how long has Nancy Pelosi been in power? Or Maxine Waters? If you look at the record
Um,
of like Democrat politicians and how they maintain power despite scandal, like I went back through there's a chapter in San Francisco where he talks about Jim Jones and how Jim Jones was, loved by these Democrats in San Francisco, and including Willie Brown, who that's Willie Brown is how Kamala Harris actually gained any power, was by blowing that guy. And that's actually a literal thing. That's not me speaking pejoratively. That's what actually happened. And so, but like how these Democrats, like they were kind of hurt by Jim Jones, but not really. And like if you look at it, like my point is they are smart about how, like, they stay in. Dude, what's his name? Marion Barry got reelected after getting caught smoking crack. And so it's like they can do this. They're Teflon because they have the media to cover for them. And so it's like my point is that they're smart and they understand what represents threats to their power, at least in a lot of ways. I'm not saying they're like universally smart, because I think these idiots are going to mandate themselves into obscurity. But and so because this represents a new thing for them, but they understand that anything that, like, why is okay, so Texas passes a heartbeat abortion bill. However you feel about that, that's fine. Like, I'm not talking about what your opinion is, but the point is they're like, hey, this is what we're going to do in Texas. Or Ron DeSantis in Florida is like, we're not going to have mandates in this place. We're not going to do these things. Why is the federal government interested in that? Why are people in California interested in what's going on in Texas and in Florida because it represents a test case of like whose policies are better, of what works better. And so just the mere they know that the mere existence of alternatives invites people to go, how's it going over there? That's why the media has worked so fucking hard to like demonize these places. And then whenever COVID cases start going down there, they're like, oh, how come Florida and Texas aren't in the news anymore? That's really weird, huh? Gee, I wonder. And so they, because they don't want people to see that there are alternatives to their plan, to their ideas.
Well, that's very depressing.
welcome to the present day, man. Throw a rock in any direction, you're gonna hit some shit that's really depressing. Well, so on the other side of that depressing thing, though, like how have you? So the surge that wasn't.
Yeah,
How have you dealt with that? Like, that was the thing that I started to ask you at the end of our last conversation. Is like, how have you psychologically? How have you managed to like just keep yourself healthy mentally and emotionally, like through a lot of this stuff? Because it seems like I feel like every time I talk to you, I'm like, or watch like a video, I'm like, man, Jodi Shaw is going through like the red pill crash course. Like this is like whenever I got my master's, it was like a 1 year thing. It was like a 2 year degree in 1 year. It's like 56 credits or something like that in 1 year. Is like really just drinking through a fire hose. And I'm like, I feel like Jodi Shaw is just like it's like that Clockwork Orange thing where it's like this this like red pills is just like ah. So I feel like you're like are kind of going like
for my
that, and that.
the videos because I kind of like I'm going through this process and I'm just like filming it, like
Yep.
thought process. And I should like call it the Jodi Shaw crash course, like master's
Right.
degree in killing, like in real
Yep.
time. Like you can watch somebody become red pilled. The
Oh
red
yeah.
peeled, as you call it, red peeling.
Red peeling. It is. I've been saying that the order of pills is distributed in blue, red, black, white. That most people start out blue pilled, then they get red pilled. The more the red peeling process takes place, the more like, holy shit, this is terrible, and they become black pilled. And then on the other side of the black pill, if you make it, is a white pill, I think. But
Yeah, I
anyway,
feel
but
like
how have
yeah.
you feel like what?
Well, I think the white pills might look different from each other. I'm not sure. I have
I, it just is anything that represents hope is a white
okay,
pill.
yeah, I have the white pill for sure.
Optimism and hope. Yeah, I have that too. I was so black pilled, Jody. I was so black pilled not even that long ago. I was like,
It
it's
doesn't
pretty
feel
bad.
yeah, it's a really it's been almost impossible to describe the mental state. I think so much about people living under communism and
Mm,
God, cultural revolution. I mean, so many people committed suicide. That's like
yeah.
a Chinese scholar told me that. Like, I mean, there were so many suicides, and there were a lot of suicides amongst the peasants, but there were a lot of suicides amongst the intellectual class and like the concert pianists and the artistic. Because
Mm.
I mean, so yeah, it can get pretty. It's a depression or blah. It's kind. It's not because it's not just on the micro. Like you get depressed. You feel like, oh, my life's not going well. But this is like the whole culture. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just it's like it's such a black pill. Such a black pill.
So how have you dealt with that? How have you been dealing with
Oh,
just the whether on the micro, the relational stuff, or on the macros, you realize this stuff, well, like stuff with COVID, for example, like whenever I see people putting masks on like 4-year-olds, I'm like, I'm filled with violent rage right now. And and by the way, I'm glad that I still have that feeling. Like I use this term, um, it astounding but not surprising. Like it shocks my sensibilities, whenever I see these things, just as like, I think I'm a moral, reasonable person. And so I haven't become calloused, I guess, to this stuff yet, which is nice. But it also makes it to where I can experience pretty vividly the anger and pain that comes along with seeing a lot of these atrocities happen in real time and feeling helpless to do anything about it. Um,
impetus, that feeling of impotence.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that's hard.
difficult.
that's hard to that's
Yeah.
come up
But
with.
it's like that there's always been externalities to freedom, right? Like people often make mistakes in their lives, and that often, and those mistakes and bad decisions often have collateral damage, quite often with children and people and their loved ones. And that's kind of always been the case. It's just what we're seeing more, I guess, vivid manifest and more frequent manifestations of it. Maybe, I don't know. What do you think?
I haven't actually thought about that. That it's always that the collateral damage and how that's always on a micro level. Certainly, like if you have something going on that's kind of, I don't know. Let's say you have a gambling thing going on. That's
Alcoholism. Yeah.
right, like that. I mean, that's micro, but that has an impact. That's collateral damage.
Yeah.
But usually on the micro level, if you have an issue, say it's depression or alcoholism or whatever, we have a macro level system set up to where you can whom to which you can appeal for help,
Yeah.
like systems to help. That's what we've created this like system to help people on a micro level. But now you have a micro level issue. There is no macro level because the macro level is also infected and
Yeah, it's corrupted. It does the exact opposite. Yeah.
suffering from alcoholism or whatever it is. It's also suffering from a disease, a dis-ease, massive dis.
Mm,
So now you don't
mm.
have that anymore. There is no institution to appeal to or ask for help or who's going to intervene. So that can make the micro level really bad. So for me, it got really bad this summer because the I lost a lot of people in a lot of community. We're talking about the lack of surge, and I was greeted with open arms by a lot of new people that I thought, oh, here are my friends, here are the fighters, here are my friends and allies, the truth seekers. And then the vax mandates dropped. Remember, it was the Department of Homeland Security alert, and it wasn't not the Merrick Garland letter, the alert that came out in August. I was in New York City at the time when the or I was like they announced it, and I was in New York like the next week or something, and it didn't really quite hit me because New York still seemed like nobody was wearing a mask. Well, that's not true. I get on the train, everyone was wearing masks, but it just felt normal. It was summertime, cases were low. But then when I saw that, I came home and I saw that letter, the Department of Homeland Security about terrorists, and there's a terror alert. This is previous to 9/11, and we have to do this. And they mentioned January 6th, they mentioned COVID measures. And if you think something about the election, if you think it was
It was parents. It was that the one where they mentioned parents going to school board meetings too.
no, this was before. This was in
Oh,
August.
okay.
Terror alert.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Yep, yep, yep.
And I was like, and I remember I went and read it because I saw somebody grabbed a screenshot from the news and it said January 6th, COVID measures, and if you believe Trump should be president or something. It was something
Yeah.
sensational. I went and read it. It didn't say exactly that in the statement from the Department of Homeland Security, but I was like, that's when it really hit me. Wow, this is really getting, this is really it now. And I started speaking about the vax mandates, or sorry, I keep calling the vax mandates, COVID measures, the mandated COVID measures, started just questioning them. And all of these people I thought were my friends and allies, not all of them, some of them um, were like, are you okay? Uh, and,
Are
you know,
you okay? If you're asking me that, are you okay?
just like I brought it up at a meeting one time of a, yeah, well, I'll just, it was a group I'm in, and that's fighting K through 12 CRT stuff. And I said, well, for 12, I think we're going to have to bring mandates too, because that's really impacting children. And to me,
Negatively.
it's very clearly related. And there was like silence. And so I don't, it's like people are, it's like the same thing all over again. People are afraid to talk about, either they know and they're afraid to talk about it, or they're just like, what the fuck are you talking about? You're literally hurting people if you are against these mandates. So for me, that's when the macro level really hit bottom. And my solution, because we're talking about so how do am I working out of this is to go deeper, to find, I made a video about this, find anchors that are outside
No,
of this era.
that was a
Because
good video.
thank you. There's no footing here anymore. We have complete chaos. We Some people have footing. It's this watch going back and forth in the media. Like that's I can see I can see the appeal of that because very
Yeah,
comfortable. Like, oh, everything's gonna be okay. Like mom and dad are here. You know,
you're on the good guys. You're on the side of the. You're on the right side of history. You're one of
I
the good ones. You're
okay.
smart. You're enlightened.
We're taking care of these issues. That's like believing that the macro is still in place. And
Hmm.
I, obviously you and I don't see that. And so my solution is to go further. I've noticed that, I mean, I am listening to contemporary music again, but for a while there, I could only listen to Bach and some
Wow.
Mozart and some few other people, but only, I mean, I really like classical music anyway, but I could only listen to music that was not of this era. And there was something extremely comforting about that because I think because one, it's like it's a sign, it's very hopeful. It's like that survived. That
Yep.
that that's like something. And I started thinking a lot more about God. Started talking to God a lot.
Hmm.
And just stuff like that, and seeking out people. I mean, I've always kind of been like that, like Carl Jung. Like I've always felt closer in some ways spiritually to people who aren't alive anymore, because
Sure.
it's not them, the material person, it's their spirit that's still with us, and we can
Yep.
still access to. And so I'm trying to access that. And I also realized recently, Truman, something very important is that when you pare it all back, when you peel, like, what are we fighting? Am I fighting for a paycheck? I'm fighting for my kids not to be thinking about this shit. The core to me of what I want and seek and hope for to preserve and to save, like, what am I fighting for? What do I want? I mean, people call it freedom. I think the ability to connect or to love, to truly love and truly connect with another human being, and even if that's through, and people do that through music or whatever, but or just love, really, I think it comes down to that. I like that is what must be destroyed in order for this to take root. And so if I can keep that alive inside of me and engage with others and keep it alive in them, then it's like we're saving humanity.
Hmm.
That's what it feels like. That that ability, because people are so cynical. I mean, we're physically covering up our faces. We're not
Yeah.
free to talk to each other. If you're not free in your own head, you can't really love somebody else. So it's really inside here that I have to preserve my humanity at all costs,
Yeah.
no matter what. And I have to try to connect with other people to preserve it in a more macro way too. Even if it doesn't look like an institution, it doesn't look like an organization, but it's real. It's not named. It doesn't have a name, um, but it's the real thing. And I think what is that's what is being asked of us, is to give that up or expect it, or we're trying to be forced. We are giving it up. It's inside our heads, and I'm
Hmm.
not going to give it up.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that that's like? Why is that a priority to if I understand what I heard you say is our ability to love and connect, maybe genuine, maybe like authentically, like
Authentic.
actually authentically, not like
The
not authentic according to the script, but actually authentic. Like, why do you think that's a threat? Or why do you think they're like want us to give that up? Or you know what I mean?
Because it's not of, because it's
Yeah.
10%. It's the Because anything meaningful is a threat. Because it's just like, what it reminds me of? Magic mushrooms. I
Okay.
was
Let's
reading
do
the
it.
Michael Pollan book. The Michael Pollan book, change How to Change Your Mind. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Uh-uh.
journalist. I think he was a food journalist. I don't know. He's written some other books and stuff, and he decided to go down this journey of exploring psychedelics. And in the book, he talks about his experience trying psychedelics, and he talks about the history. But the part that I'm talking about was the history of mushrooms in Mexico, I believe, and how it was a spiritual, like people used mushrooms for actual spirit, for direct connection with the source or God or the universe, and as a healing measure and everything, like a real authentic connection. And the Spaniards came in and they were like, oh, no, 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 no. You
Yeah.
can't have those mushrooms. That's illegal. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
because they wanted them to be Catholics. It's the
Yep.
same thing with the Catholic Church. Like, there's God, and then there's like a whole institution in between us and God. And it's like they need to exert a whole lot of power. Like, you must go through the priest, then you go through the archbishop. Like, there's all these like things that you have to
Yep.
do to access God. Like, you can't do it on your own, mere mortal. Like,
Yep.
we can do that for you. The Pope
The
is
enlightened, we the enlightened. Yeah.
right. So that's what it reminds me, and that's why. And so this threat of the magic, it's like this threat of people having direct access to something that cannot be controlled or mediated by the state.
Yeah.
That's the threat. And so that,
Yeah.
to me, is what I feel like, if I'm in this fight, that's what I'm fighting for. Like, I'm not giving that up, because
Hmm.
that's everything.
Yeah.
And
There have I told you about the history of the Bible being translated into English? Do you know anything about that?
no, I know about the Gnostic Gospels, though. Does it have
No,
anything
no, 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 no. So the
from what, like, from Aramaic? Was it written in Aramaic?
no, no. So in the early under early Catholicism of the Holy Roman Empire, and there's a lot of that's why you can still go to like Latin Mass, like where they'll read the Bible in Latin. There are certain services where they read it in Latin, but that's what it was written in. And so the priests were the only ones who could read it. And so they were the only ones who could explain it to the people. And there was, after the invention of the printing press, there was this push to well, it was after the invention of the printing press is so I what the printing press was, oh man, 1400s, 1500s, I can't remember exactly. It was, I know it was within a generation after the invention of the printing press is when the Reformation happened. But prior to that, there are these pushes by people like William Tyndale to to say, why don't we translate this into English? These are the people who, like, today, one of the reasons why I feel such a kinship with these folks is because they were saying things that I'm like, that you can tell they thought this was a common sense thing. Like, surely we're all going to be on the same page about this, right? Like, surely we want kids to be in school. Surely we don't want them to be taught that color is the most important thing, right? This is, come on, guys. And then they hit this institutional wall where it's like, oh, I guess we aren't all in agreement here. But
Yeah.
there was these people. So Tyndale was one who was like, we need to translate this into English. And as there was this movement to translate the Gospels and the Bible into English, the Holy Roman Church, or the Holy Roman Empire, the Catholic Church, ended up making it illegal, and it was a crime punishable by death to translate the scriptures into English. Tyndale actually ended up being caught, and I believe he was tortured and then burned alive. He was either tortured to death and then burned, or tortured and then burned at the stake. One of those two, I can't remember. Just for the crime they called a heresy, but of wanting to make truth available to the masses, and
Mm,
to remove those people who are like, no, we're the ones who will tell you.
mm.
And the reason why I see it's such a, like, there's obviously a lot of similarities between that and today, but it's exactly what you're saying, where there are these people who it's like, we have this special access to truth, and you can't understand it, you couldn't do this. You need us. And anything that represents someone saying, no, actually, I don't need you, I can just read this right here, because that's how we get the Protestant Reformation. It was really cool whenever I was in Italy. Gosh, this is 5 years ago now, almost exactly 5 years ago. In the Vatican, reading the Luther's 99 that he nailed to the door that started the Reformation. Luther, even in that, he like it was called the Reformation because they thought they were going to reform the Catholic Church. Like they thought, like, oh yeah, we're all on the same page here. We'll just make some changes. And it's like, nope, the institution acted like white blood cells to a pathogen and pushed them out. And that's where you get a lot of people moving to the US where they're like, oh, okay, well, we'll be Quakers over here, I guess. But it's like what you're saying of where whenever there is a threat to the power being the source of meaning and the source of the they're the ones who interpret meaning and truth for you as opposed to allowing you to do that yourself, then
Yeah.
they respond
And I think
accordingly.
we're at a point too where a lot of people are bereft. Like we had some conditions to kind of make it a little easier.
Yeah.
People alienated and like lack of meaning and all that. When you were talking, I was reminded of Galileo. Same thing. I
Yep.
mean,
Same
that
thing. Yeah.
right, like because it
Yep.
threat the notion that the Earth was the center of everything.
Yep. Yeah.
It didn't have anything to do with, no, actually we think you're actually wrong. Like when
Yeah.
it was, they knew he was right, probably. They didn't care.
Yeah. But it was, you're a threat.
So
Do,
that
do you think that there's a thing that you said? So I'm noticing this, and I've noticed this over the last couple of years, where there is, where I think people are, how would I articulate it? Sorry. There was a push that, and James Lindsay recently did a podcast about this where I was like, this is exactly right. Where he said, and it seems like he's kind of on this path, like intellectually, and I like it. Where he's like, they pushed church or the church or like theology out as the like kind of one of the hubs of intellectual thought, and they replaced it with the universities, and the universities just weren't capable of filling that void. And so we're getting this, like when earlier whenever you said we don't have institutions anymore to try and help people answer these things, I'm like, well, we do. I just think they're so used to irrelevance and obscurity that they don't know how to rise to the challenge. Like if this was 70 years ago, you would see like churches like be loudly saying like this isn't working, like this, like, hey, like we've got some answers. But I don't think the Christian, at least a Christian church in America, knows how to do that anymore because they're just so used to being on the fringe.
I know,
But
but I've heard so many people recently telling me I don't go to church anymore. I just heard it
wait,
last weekend because the churches are.
exactly. Well, what I'm saying is that there's a thing where I'm seeing people coming back around and to like this progressive religion that we've tried, that we've been like kind of beta testing in the United States for the last 70 years or so, if not more, doesn't really work. It's not providing people with meaning. And so there are people who are abandoning that, and they're acting like it's like we're in a reformation, but of people like abandoning the church. If you were to substitute the Catholic Church at the height of its power and influence, that's the progressive church, that's the cathedral now. And they're seeing people nailing these treatises to the door of like, this isn't working, here's ways in which you are completely like contradicting your own ideals, here's ways in which you're being hypocritical, surely you actually mean this, or whatever. And those people are getting the same response that the William Tyndales and the Martin Luthers received from the Catholic Church. It's like, well, I thought we were on the same page, but I guess we aren't. And so then you're seeing these different denominations crop up of people like, well, maybe I can do this here. The psychedelics thing, I think, is one of them, where it's like this kind of thing where people were like, okay, maybe I can go and tap into something true here because this thing didn't work over here. But there's also people who are kind of coming back to, I've seen this a lot with people who are Jewish in heritage and who are like going back to Judaism and going back to just going to temple and yeshiva and stuff, because they're like, I want to connect with something that is deeper than this progressive religion that I've just been force fed my whole life. People like Michael Schellenberger doing that. Dave Rubin, getting back, there's a bunch of people that are doing that who are Jewish, and people I think are doing that same thing with Christianity to varying degrees. And so it's like people are abandoning this church and it's responding accordingly. But but are you noticing that same kind of thing? Like you said, I've been talking to God more, I've been doing this. Like, are you seeing that same thing in these circles where people were like, there's got to be something more than what I've been told there is? And they're kind of seeking that out on their own, and they're experiencing the backlash whenever they do that publicly.
Yeah. Yeah, but mostly it's interesting. Like some people kind of drifted away from those anchors, and they're
Yeah.
like people just refinding or returning to that world or that
Yeah.
connection. I I think that's a good question, because not all of us have a tendency to seek out in to even to begin with. I mean, I think there's a certain mind state to begin with, because the big question is, why is it 10% or 2%? What is it about us that's different? And I tend to think that though we were already kind of like that, it's kind of a
Mm.
personality or a genetic mutation, as I like to say, which now I'm starting to wonder, maybe it is a genetic thing. Like maybe there is some evolutionary, like Brett and Heather maybe could answer this for us. Like, what is the genetic, is there an evolutionary reason for bravery, or of this extent where you
Interesting.
willing to go out this far out that you would lose everything, and
Yeah.
possibly even up to and including your integrity, and get eaten by a lion, right? Get so shunned that
Right.
I mean, why would you do that in nature? So I feel like what I'm seeing in people is that they already kind of had an underlying tendency, but it just never, some of them probably never knew it about I didn't necessarily know that about myself. And I didn't know other people didn't have that, really. I mean,
Mm.
I knew, oh, maybe I'm a little bit offbeat or different, but I didn't think I was, that like 2% or 10%. And but now I think we're fine. This filter is really making apparent that no, there's a big difference in people here. For me, it's not simply like I want to be brave, but that I see it's like I cannot tolerate not having that inside me. I cannot tolerate
Yeah.
having that connection severed. And so I think I took that connection for granted. And I
Mm.
a lot of us did. And so I don't know that I don't know, Truman. It's so deep and
Yeah.
complex, these questions. And so in some, I will say, here's a white pill, that it's been also very beautiful to, for example, my connection with you, that's beautiful. And I'm connecting with people now in a manner, because now it's really obvious who's who.
Sure.
I didn't know that before. And so I was
Mm.
connecting, not, it was kind of like half-assed, connecting, friends, whatever. Now it's
Yeah.
like the people who are left in my life, like
Yeah.
deep connection.
It's a cream rises to the top kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's a very rapid attraction, I think.
Yeah.
And maybe that's also evolutionary, like you can't be out here on my own, but I think that these are people who I just wouldn't have been able to find before through all the noise.
Right.
Now I see them very clearly, and I kind of I'm feeling, I guess I'm feeling pretty tribal. What can I say?
Yeah.
That's
Mm.
what's going on.
We're tribal animals, and I do think that I think we're worshiping animals. I think we're animals that are made to worship and to I think we are made to have some kind of religious structure. But people say I'm an atheist. It's like, no, you're not. Look at build develop your hierarchy of values. Whatever is the very top of your hierarchy of values, that's your God. That's who you worship.
Mm.
That's the thing that drives your life, that everything points to. So it's like we are those things. And so I think
Wow.
for and what you value, I think, is what helps determine, well, that what's at the very top of that. Obviously that's sounds a little redundant, but what I mean is, and how that informs kind of that thing we were talking about of like the why, of like, well, why am I like this and not this other person or these other people? I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like there's a lack of agreeableness that it is combined with a staunch adherence to truth, that makes it where it's like, because you have to be disagreeable enough to vocalize what is true, but you also have to care enough about truth to actually reach those conclusions, and to have something to vocalize. Like, I think about pretty often, and I've told this story multiple times, maybe even to you, but the very first YouTube video that I made was a thing that sat like burning in my gut for months and months. And like, it was just like, I'm seeing a thing that I have to say something about. And I often equate it to the thing that kept coming to my mind was, and I mentioned this, I think, on Twitter, and we talked about it maybe even last time, of like how Jeremiah was this prophet, and he's sent to go, to Israel, to be like, hey, you're screwing up. People are gonna, like, they're gonna invade. Like, people are gonna invade. God's gonna send judgment on us if you don't do something and different, and like return to what's true and what's good. And he lost all of his relationships. He was shunned. He was hated by the people. He was humiliated. And there's this line at the beginning of Jeremiah where he says, if I don't speak it, or if I say I'm going to remain silent, or I'm not going to speak his name, it's like there's a fire shut up in my bones, in my throat. Indeed, I cannot contain it. So it's like, he's like, I tried. I actually, like, he knows that feeling, because he did try to not speak. He was like, screw this sucks. And the cost of remaining silent for him, like psychologically and emotionally, was higher than the external cost of speaking out. And I think there is, like, whenever you know what's true and you know what's right, and you're someone who is disagreeable enough to like do that math and be like, I guess I don't care, like, I'm going to sleep easier at night with all these people mad at me than I will if these people like me, but I'm being silent. Like, silence is what makes it where I lose sleep. Speaking out and pissing people off does not cause me to lose sleep. But I think that's
Hmm.
just a quirk, a thing that some people have, is that it's I care about truth enough that it outweighs my desire for social approval, maybe.
Yeah, it's a good to distinguish. It's not just knowing the truth, because a lot of people know it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's valuing it enough to risk something, to say, hey, this is not right. And that is the distinction, I think. And then, of course, there
yeah,
are people that probably don't know the truth. But I think they know something's wrong.
yeah,
Interesting what you said about the value, the thing you value most. Like, that's sometimes you don't always know until you're in a situation like this.
totally,
Ask
totally.
to, and you don't know what other people like. I could say, well, I value this, or I value this. Like, if things were normal, right? But now I realize, now I am very aware of what my primary, most precious thing to me is in the world.
Hmm.
I'm
And
very,
what's that?
uh, well, I don't know, truth. I don't know if it has a label. Love,
Yeah,
humanity. The, I mean, that had the
yeah,
my connection to the eternal
yeah.
inside of my inner world. My inner world, I've always known that about myself. My inner world is very, very important to me.
Hmm.
Somebody fucking with my inner world is like bad. That's bad.
Yeah,
I can put up with a lot of physical discomfort, and even like even emotional discomfort, but you try to fuck with my inner world. Like when I start seeing like little police in there running around, I'm like, whoa, what? No, like I can't. That's when it's like it. You know what I mean by fucking, like
Yep.
you're asked to go along with things and you bite you, so you're kind of perpetuating the lie. You're going along.
Performative.
Yeah,
I didn't audition for this part.
but
I
you're
didn't
going
audition for this
with
part.
it anyway because you're
Yeah.
like, my internal world is intact. So I'm just gonna
Yeah.
go through these motions and have my own thing inside. I have my own thoughts in my head. And but then when I start to notice that I'm like not that it's been fucked with, I think that's the line for me.
Do you know who Charles Spurgeon is?
Mm-mm.
He's this great theologian from centuries past, and I have his, like, the complete works of Charles Spurgeon, and he's an absolute genius. And he has this uh, story that he writes about how, um, even like he talks about, he introduces it first talking about like doctors, and how even like the most sensitive doctor, uh, who is like every single time they even hear the cough of a patient or a patient in pain, like it gets them at their core, like to varying degrees they become calloused to
Mm.
like that pain. And I think a lot of that is self-preservation, like you kind of have to, whenever you're inundated in that. But he says, and then he like maps that on to like pastors and other Christians, and he's like, but we can do the same thing where we can become numb to the pain around us and to the evil around us, and be like those doctors. And he talks about how it's a fight to constantly to not become numb and callous to those things. And that's where, like I was saying earlier, like where I'm glad that there are things that I'm still like, it shocks my sensibilities, or it's astounding, like it does something to my humanity to see these things that are wrong, but it doesn't surprise me intellectually, but I still have that emotional visceral response. And I think it's important to fight for that, to not become numb and callous, like you said, to like just go, get used to it and go along with it, because that incrementally, by playing the part, I think it does deaden
Yeah.
our sensitivity to these things that are just wrong.
Yeah,
And it's that thing of you lie to yourself enough, you start to believe the lie, kind of thing.
yeah, you die inside. That's the goal. Because if you have a bunch of dead
Mm,
walking people around, you can get them to do anything you want.
yeah. Yeah. How, because you're very much an artist, you know so how have you seen like art and beauty, kind of be a thing that is an anchor, for you in this? You mentioned music, like older music. Is there anything else that you found, like what have, like, for you, like what are the anchors you're like, these aren't just anchors, they're lifelines, like these are the things that, like, man, without this, I don't know where I'd be.
Um, love. um, I'm starting to get more acutely aware of nature.
Hmm.
Um, geez. Okay, so lifelines, poetry, specifically by like Liesl Mueller, people who are familiar with communist regimes and totalitarian.
Who is this? I want to write this person down. What's her name?
Liesl, Mueller. I really like her poem. And then Liesl is Lisel. I think she died. Um, yeah, and there's lots of other poets. I mean, poets who are able to distill. There's one poem about, it's called the history exam. I think it's not Simba. I can't pronounce his name. Wislawa is the first name. Um,
It's racist if you can't pronounce their name,
I know. Um,
even if they're like Polish or something.
yeah, culturally insensitive.
That's
Um,
right. That's right.
there's a poem, and of course, it's a total like sacrilege to try to describe and distill the essence of a poem. But it's basically, it's a very short poem. It's called It's been translated a few different ways. There's one particular translation I really like, and it's the exam is the history of mankind.
Hmm.
And the person is the speaker's taking the exam, and there's two monkeys, and it's based on Bruegel's Two Monkeys, that painting, I believe.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's the two monkeys. I posted it to Twitter. The two monkeys are sitting there, and the speaker says, "When I forget what the answer is," the the monkeys are both wearing chains. And they're chained, and they're looking out the window at this ocean, but they're inside like this room with bars and chains. And he's like, "When I forget what my answer is, one of the monkeys gently clinks the chain to remind me, in essence, the history of humanity."
Huh.
So,
Why is that a poem why is that an anchor for you?
because there's something very comforting. It's kind of like the same reason why sometimes I get really down. I'll watch like a really sad movie, not like a sad sappy movie, but like Antonia's Line. I like to watch a lot. Like uh, for some reason, there's comfort in knowing that we are not alone, and that
Hmm.
is not that evil is in fact banal. That's what the
Yeah.
just heard that somebody was talking about evil, like just it's banal. It's part of who we are. It's our essence. It's embedded in us. And you could even go back further and say it's the fact that they're monkeys, I think, is no accident. I mean, there's a like a we are descended from apes, right? And there's this ape, this power, there's all these power stuff going on inside of us. And we either mediate it in a cultural, in a beneficial way to our communities, or we refuse to mediate it and in fact stoke it.
Hmm.
And so it's what's happening now. And so
Sure.
it's I don't know, there's just a lot of comfort in knowing, and there's comfort to me. I'm actually reading Viktor Frankl's book now.
Yeah.
And reading.
Answers for meaning. Yeah.
Yeah, there's comfort in, I don't know, I think for me there's just comfort in knowing in general about these things. Like I have this urge to figure it out inside me, to be able to tell the story to myself of why this is happening. So really it's storytelling, I guess, and that's the poetry is telling a story of the history of mankind. If I can tell myself when things are really bad, if I'm able to tell myself a story about it, to either construct my own story, which I have had to do in the past when there's been no, I couldn't find another story. They're probably out there, but I just couldn't find them. So I had to literally make a story up, literally make a story up, like with characters and everything, to explain the phenomenon that was happening inside of me, or what the phenomenon is happening in society. And we have so many stories that tell the story of what we're living through now. And
Right.
it's because it describes meaning to it. So now we come back to the meaning and the authentic connection, because it enables me to be authentically connected to what's going on without going batshit.
Right.
Yeah, to love somebody else has been through this. They they've now told a story about it. I get it. This is what's happening. There's something comforting in that. And then I feel connected to that person. Like I'm not alone. There's somebody else that sees this.
Do you think we've lost our ability to like feel the full spectrum of our feelings? Like there's this societal numbing that's taken place, and that like we don't know how to deal with. I heard Adam Carolla give a really good explanation when he was talking about people's response to COVID. And I think this might have been a conversation with Dave Rubin, I can't recall, but he said, he's like, we have a whole generation of people that don't, I haven't cultivated a relationship with risk. This is just one example. And so they don't know how to properly calibrate risk. So any risk is all risk, to them, and at least mentally, right? Like there's
Yeah.
risk when you get in the car, for example. Like they live in these metropolitan areas where there's a risk of a hobo stabbing you in the ass with a dirty needle every time you're walking down the street. And so it's like they don't map like, oh, there's a risk of this, there's a risk of this, but like, and so but people just don't have really well, they don't have a healthy relationship with risk, and so they don't know how to deal with the feelings that come with risk. And so they want to, like, I think we want to like deaden those things. And same way with like I see this with boredom. I know boredom is this isn't necessarily a feeling, it's more of just like it's a state of being. But like this is one of the reasons why a long time ago I got rid of all games on my phone. Because I'm like, I don't want to be every time I'm like standing at a urinal, have to get my phone out because I can't deal with the 45 seconds of being bored while I'm standing taking a piss. Like that's crazy. Like I need to be able to deal with like just my thoughts without something injecting what I should be thinking or thinking about to every waking moment of my life. And so it's like we've lost this ability to just be in whatever state we happen to be in and to engage with that. So whether that's like anxiety, I remember who I was talking or I was listening to. This was a Nassim Taleb book. This might have been Anti-Fragile actually, where he was like, where we wouldn't have like great like would we have Edgar Allan Poe if antidepressants and stuff were like a thing in his day? It's like no, they would have just put him on some pills and we wouldn't have some of these great writings. We wouldn't have a lot of the art and poetry and music that we have if all of these people just medicated themselves or dulled their senses and just distracted themselves away from feeling their feelings in that moment. And so it seems like a lot of,
Be-
say again,
Being alone.
being alone. Yeah, being alone in your own thoughts. Another thing I think about really often is there was this great show, it's still on, I think, on History Channel. It's like one of the only good like reality shows that I only watched the first few seasons, but it was called Alone. And have you seen that? It's like where the people do the survival thing. So it's 10 people. do,
No,
you,
not
do you feel like you're on the show? Sometimes I feel like I'm on the show sometimes. But they would get dropped off, and so they can take like there's a set list, and you can take like these 10 items, and it's like they're dropped off in different parts of Vancouver Island. And it's like whoever stays the longest and just survives the longest by themselves wins. I think it's like $50,000. This is how it was at the beginning. I don't know how it is now. And like there was one season, it was either season one or season two, where a guy left like who had everything taken care of, and he was just bored, and so he just taps out because he's bored. He has all of his needs met. He had like built a canoe, and he was like going and harvesting these mussel shells every day, and he like carved a ukulele. He had like a two string ukulele. He leaves, and the last two guys left in this season are like these guys who are probably each consuming like 100 calories a day. One of them's living off like a mouse every day. The other guy's like eating slugs. And the guy who ends up winning has this thing where he's talking. This is season one, where he's talking to the camp, because that part of them being on the show, what makes it great is like they take like 2 weeks of training to like film themselves, and so people come and like pick up their like recordings, and they're just recording themselves out there. And the longer they're out there, the more like spread out the recordings become. But the guy who won said this thing. He's like, whenever you're out here, it's just you. So you better get to like yourself, because all of your regrets, all the things you don't like about yourself, all of your fears are going to come flooding into your mind. And so you have to contend with you when it's just you. So you better learn how to deal with yourself. And like just that truth of like how like again feeling those feelings whenever like they come at us, and not just distracting ourselves, because when they're out there they don't have the ability to distract themselves. They can't pull out the cell phone, right? It's like you're just sitting alone by yourself. And like like my point is do you think people have lost the ability to contend with that, to contend with the feelings that make them uncomfortable, the feelings that make them afraid or whatever? And like we used to have relationships with sadness. We used to have healthy relationships, I think, with anger or with boredom or whatever, with anxiety, with risk, and we just don't have that anymore. And so there, people are just grasping at things like you mentioned earlier, the clock, with the media, it's comforting. It's like, you're okay. You're one of the good guys, we'll take care of it for you.
well.
Like
That's
people want to flock to that paternal relationship because they don't know how to deal with these other things.
well, yeah. That's it. That's the whole goal, right? I mean, you're talking about the healthy relationship sadness. You're talking about the ability to tolerate discomfort, internal discomfort, is actually greater than in is than their ability to tolerate physical. Like that guy, He'd certainly cultivated an ability to survive, physically survive in the natural world, but he had not cultivated his inner world at all. And so the ultimate
Yeah.
demise, he didn't get the $50,000. And then you think about people surviving in, somebody told me about the guy, I don't know who it was, I'm sorry, locked up in prison for many, many, many years and reciting T.S. Eliot. Like he
Hmm.
had something, he had that was his anchor. That's how he got through it. Uh, that's the whole at Smith, that was the whole thing. That wasn't the whole thing, but that was one of the major things that really bothered me was that this because that is the point, I think, in many ways of this ideology, if you believe that the end game is we want people to be marching towards it. We want people to be like, I don't know how to do anything, and therefore I don't know how to tolerate this. So I'm gonna whip out my phone, or I don't know how to, I'm gonna listen to this because I don't know. At at Smith, this social justice curriculum, in fact, the whole vibe of the whole place, grounded in CRT and gender ideology and all the rest, was disempowering. It was not, forget that. Let me backtrack. The telling students, it was the inclusive stuff too. Telling students and advertising, you're going to come to Smith College and you're going to be included because we have inclusion. We have inclusion. There's a whole department, diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's the I,
Hmm.
right? Inclusion. This notion of inclusion. So these young people who are leaving home, many leaving home for the first time, not all of them, but coming to a place with the promise of I'm going to feel like you're promising a feeling. You're promising, you're
Yeah.
guaranteeing if you spend this money, you're going to have this feeling of
You're
inclusion.
gonna be part of something bigger.
And you're going to be included. You're going to have this community. You're these house community. So inevitably, because that's not an instant, you don't walk into a group of people and instantly have a feeling. You can't draw up a feeling on command. Maybe some people do instantly feel included, whatever that feeling is, right? That's the other thing.
And however deep or shallow it is.
Right. I mean, how do you quantify inclusion? But anyway, at an exclusive women liberal arts college, by the way, exclusive. So these students would inevitably arrive to campus, and there's some discomfort because there is discomfort with such a big transition like that. Transitions are uncomfortable. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know anybody. You're away from home. Some of these students are all across from all over the world, and these are strangers. You're not going to feel included. You're not, whatever that means. It's not going to feel comfortable. And it felt like we were constantly just setting up these false expectations. And so the feeling was either there's something wrong with the college. This is in the student mind. There's something wrong with the college because I don't feel included and you're responsible for making me feel included. Or there's something wrong with me because
Hmm.
everyone else must be included and there's something wrong with me. And it felt extremely disempowering to be constantly giving the message to students that you should be comfortable and feeling good all the time, instead of giving them the tools they need to navigate discomfort and tolerate discomfort. It's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to, conflict is inevitable. In fact,
Hmm.
conflict means you're alive. It means you're alive.
It's
And
necessary. It's a necessary component to life.
that is literally at the crux of progress. Conflict is inextricable from the process of making progress towards something.
Yeah.
So that, I think, is like the part of the goal, is to make people so they can't handle their own inner world and they're not even familiar with their inner world. We don't exactly encourage people to go into their inner world and cultivate it. We have
Instead, they plant seeds of this is where your inner world should be. Your inner world, you should see it through the lens of how we tell you to see it, through your
there's
race or your sexual identity or whatever. So they implant a thing to make them, oh, you don't feel included as who you are. We're going to tell you who you are and how you should see yourself so
yeah.
that you can be a part of this thing.
And
We'll
if
hollow you out, man. We'll
right,
hollow you out.
feel that, you inevitably are going to start feeling anxiety because it doesn't feel right, because it's not honest. And so then you're like, oh my, it's like you clean, then you walk towards, we know what's right over here. I don't, I, there's a lot wrong with it. Let's put it that way. And so I don't know that we're doing it to ourselves. I guess when you say, are we doing that? I guess we are, by going along with it.
Well, I mean more. I mean, whenever I say we, I mean more like what is it? The Big Lebowski, the royal we, man. You know, like the societal we. I don't. I think that that's something. You know, just like what we were talking about before we started, of just like
Mm.
ideas that I had in my mind that I don't know where they came from. You know, of notions about reality that I don't know where they came from.
Mhm.
You know, again, I quote Eric Weinstein a lot, where he's like, I have all this malware in my head and I didn't put it there. I don't know who put it there, but I'm constantly having to contend with malware in my brain. And so I think that's kind of part of the process of where we are, of just like having to go back. And, you know, it's funny, so much of the left, or not necessarily the left, but like this kind of ascendant orthodoxy, like they don't just project their pathologies onto us, they project the solutions to their pathologies onto us. And deconstruction, you know, in a certain sense, is one of those things where it's like I have to go back and deconstruct a lot of the stuff that I was taught, or a lot of the axioms that I have, and just go, where did this come from? Why do I have this thought in my mind? Why do I mean, we're talking about Tucker Carlson, right? It's like, why do I not like Tucker Carlson? Like whenever I go back and think about my friend in college who in 2007, you know, or eight, I was 2007, had a John McCain sign in his yard. And I immediately was like, what, why, no, like, why do you, like, what's wrong? Like, what? That's a Republican. Don't you know who that is? Like, and I don't know why I had a negative opinion of John McCain. I didn't know jack shit about John McCain. Right. And so
Yes.
it's like I just had these responses that I did not come up with. You know, there are responses that are natural. They call this squick. It's where you have an innate revulsion to things. Like if you saw a person eat vomit and then eat their own vomit, you would naturally have an aversion to that, right? Like your body would have a thing where it's like, no. And so that's squick.
Always
It's
that
like
bad.
it's disgust. It's a we have an innate disgust in us to certain things. And so like there are some things where it's like, okay, this is normal and natural, but there are other things that are clearly implanted in us.
Mm.
And I think figuring out, going back and deconstructing which one of those is which, is a huge part of what's necessary for people like us in this situation now. And
Well,
it's a very disquieting thing. It's a destabilizing thing at first, for sure.
yeah, but that's also, so deconstruction is not necessarily bad in and of itself, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I think some of us were already trying to do that. That's the
Mm-hmm.
tendency. That's one of the tendencies. Like, because the malware, it isn't just like, woke ideology. It's like your can come from your parents.
Sure.
We always have these notions or these inaccurate, as Jordan Peterson called them, inaccurate perceptions or thoughts. I don't know what he calls it, or an error. We have these
Yeah.
errors in or malware, and I think anyone who's interested in their inner world is naturally going to question something. They're going to come to realize, or they're going to come up against something that makes them realize, oh, I'd always like come up against their assumptions and start to question that assumption. And then so they confront something else that cause, or a person. People who are open, maybe that's the open quality, Jordan Peterson,
Hmm.
are probably more readily suited for that or tend to do that. But that ability or that skill or that tendency, yeah, is something that one needs to bring to this new, what's the word, era, this new way of being in the world that we are. So I imagine that if you've never done that in your life before, it's going to be really hard to do it now on the micro level. It's going to be really hard to do it now that we have the micro and the macro, like,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Well, there was a time not that long ago, and for like all of human history leading up to that point, where there wasn't a shield between you and reality. You had to contend with reality. Like, if think about it, like I give this example of like, if a person is moving west, like they live in Pennsylvania and they're like, we're going to go settle in Ohio, or we're going to go farther, like, or where it's the gold rush in the 1800s. And they're like, we're going to go to California and we're on the Oregon Trail. It's like, what buffer is there between those people and reality? Every single waking moment of their life is contending with reality of like, whether it's the physical harsh reality or the mental toll of like, oh, so and so drank water from this creek and now they're dead. Like, people did not have a buffer between them and reality, and so they had to cultivate a healthy relationship with the way things are, and they had to cultivate a humility in front of that, right? In front of like how things are. It's like, it doesn't matter how I want it to be, this is how it is, and I have to contend with that. And as we've moved into this era of comfort, where people, we have more and more buffers between reality and the consequences of life and decision making and wrong thinking and like, and people themselves, where I think there's just, and that's one of the things that helps dull their engagement. And then whenever they do run into reality, it's like, what just happened? They, and I think people, I think there's a way in which people want to experience like something outside of that. I remember whenever I was in college, there was a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, still a good friend of mine, who, was very much on the track to like, going to be, came from a pretty well off family, and, upper middle class, and was going to do that, on the track to do that same thing, and very much interested in like corporate life and corporate America and want to be part of that thing. And I remember one time him telling me about how like he was reading about how these executives like, and people, oh, the newest thing is, I'm gonna take a cold shower, or take a cold shower and just feel invigorated. I'm gonna have a cold shower in the morning before work. And he was like talking about, yeah, dude, it's like, just really feel so alive. And it's like, are we that desperate, or like that, like not in tune with like how to feel alive, that like you're the way you do, like, go, how about just leave a city for 10 minutes, like go camping without a tent, like, like, but it's like people are just grasping at these things to try and feel something, but I don't think they want to feel it too much. Like, they still want it to be curated a little bit, they don't want it to be completely unfiltered.
They want it to be comfortable.
Yeah,
I
they want their discomfort to be manageable. they
Yeah,
they want they want it to be a managed discomfort.
normal.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
I think there's a direct correlation between physical discomfort and the level of your spirituality or the cultivation of one's inner world.
Go on.
Like that guy, he was, got off the island, but well, I'll tell you a story. I think maybe it's you that I told the story to, because these are the things we talk about. Because it's like the physical discomfort is so great. It's in Watership Down too. Watership Down's a book about rabbits.
The mice. Oh, it's rabbits. Yeah, no, I confuse that with the secret of Nim, or which is the mice. Watership Down's the rabbits. Yeah, yeah,
Watership Down's a beautiful like hero's journey book about this
yeah.
group of rabbits, these very brave rabbits. Uh, so I heard a story once that really stuck with me, and I think it's very pertinent. When I'm trying very hard not to use the word the utterance. So from here to forward, I shall not use The story is there's a woman who grew up, her parents were cultural anthropologists, and they were living with a hunter gatherer society, I believe, in the woods, in a jungle, South America or something. And she grew up with this tribe, never even wore shoes. I mean, she got to a certain age where it was like, okay, we're going to send you to school now. We're going to send so you can live in other civilization, this other world if you want to. So you don't only know the jungle. So they sent her to school and she didn't even have shoes. She never even worn
Hmm.
shoes before. And so she moved to she ended up in Berlin at the time of this interview, and she had such an unusual life. And so the interviewer was asking her what it was like to come to Berlin and live in Berlin after growing up in complete wild. And she said that it was physically so much more comfortable living in Berlin. Like
Hmm.
all needs were taken care of, but spiritually very hollow.
Hmm.
So I think that when you live in with reality, the physical reality, when you're that connected to your own survival, and you have to rely and trust on others to survive, and you have to contend with fires and lack of water and all kinds of, and rain and cold and all kinds of things, that I imagine that is when the inner world becomes very, very, very important, as demonstrated by your story about the people on the island, the people who were okay with who I theorize had a strong inner world, or were okay with themselves, or had some anchor outside the physical plane, were able to stay and put up with the physical discomfort, even though they didn't even have the same skills as the guy. And this guy had skills, from what it sounds like. So I
I,
think physical discomfort is does a and in Watership Down, these rabbits encounter another warren of rabbits, and the warren of rabbits is living this very precarious existence because they have this deal, like kind of unspoken, they're slowly getting picked off by this farmer. He's laying traps for them, but like they're also being able to get food from him. So there's this like thing where so and the rabbits can't understand why they have such a rich spiritual life, and I think it's because these other rabbits were so close to death and aware of it. And
hmm.
there's something about that. There's something in there. I think there's a direct correlation, and that comfort comes at a cost, or not
Yeah.
attachment doesn't come at a cost. We had it pretty good for a while where we didn't have to, a lot of us didn't have to choose. But now
Yeah.
coming to a point where we're going to have to choose. Which is it that we value more? Comfort or freedom? Or, and by freedom, I mean
Truth or
your inner world,
whatever.
your truth, your connection to something meaningful.
That was, that's what I told you, that in 2020, I realized how zealous people are for their comfort, and their material comfort and physical comfort, emotional comfort, and psychological comfort. However, they derive that, because they drive it from various places. And um, you were talking about, I think you mentioned humility, um, and how, like, that's the thing I think about. I remember this is over a year ago now. One time I woke up, and the thought was just in my head: humility isn't an option for these people. And these people I was thinking about is like, the cathedral, the people in the media who lie, and the politicians who all do all this stuff. Like, whenever you are exposed to reality, and the world as it is, and the kind of, I say futility, but I just mean like the hardness of the real world, it does cultivate a humility in you, um, of realizing what you can and can't control. And um, I think that for a lot of the people who are destroying the world right now around us, whether intentionally or not, humility is just not part of their schema, which is why you'll never see them admit to being wrong, for example. Like, and I think COVID is just another, like, I think really uh, illustrative, you know, lens with which to look at this. It's like these people are never wrong. Even when they are wrong, they don't go back and say that they are wrong. And Matt Taibbi writes about this in Hate Incorporated. He's like, you can be wrong. You can actually make an entire career about being wrong, as long as you're wrong in the same way that your team is wrong, and wrong in the approved ways. It's like, then it's fine. Like, you can literally make 6 to 7 figures exclusively on the back of being wrong. Like, that's astounding. And it would require massive amounts of humility to go against the grain and say, actually, I was wrong about this. Just look at how deep people are on, like, whether it's the vaccine stuff or masks or any COVID thing. It's like, there was that clip circulating from The View yesterday where they're like, this is how we got Omicron, is these unvaccinated people. It's like, that's not how evolutionary pressures on viruses work. Um, but it's like they could just be wrong. Like, it's like whenever you watch Brian Stelter, if for some reason you brought yourself to watch Brian Stelter on purpose, like, it's like that's all this guy does is be wrong. Like, you see, like, Ruben will tweet out something, it's like all these people do is lie. It's like, yes, but another way of articulating lying is just being wrong on purpose. And so it's like all these people do is be wrong on purpose, and they can do that. And it requires massive amounts of humility to self-correct, to go back and say, I was wrong. And so, especially on a big thing, on a thing that you maybe planted a flag on, for example. And you get that humility whenever you do have to run, whenever you are in nature, because you run into right processes and wrong processes, and it's a refining thing. Like, the first, like, people that ate foods that were poisonous, it's like they were wrong and paid a huge price for that, right? Like, I always joke, like, who is the second person to try rhubarb? Like, every part of rhubarb is poisonous but the stalk. Who is the person who's like, yeah, that killed Daryl, but I think let's give it another go, and, and like,
Part of the plant.
right? It's like, let's do this other part. Like, who discovered that if you blanch nettles 3 times, then you can eat nettles? It's like, why would you want to eat nettles? Like, well, let's blanch it. Let's try it once. Nope, my throat's really itchy. Like, let's try it. Let's blanch it twice. Nope. But it was necessity that forced that, And so it's like there's something about being in nature that cultivates that, of like, if I make mistakes, I can't keep doing that or I'm going to die. I have to correct. And I have to tell people, like, hey, I thought this process was going to work. It does not work. Like, don't do this or we're all going to starve. Don't go that way. Don't drink from that hole. Don't eat this thing. I thought this would work. It didn't. And so, but these people just have not had to face, they don't have, there's not been a relationship between their wrongness and the consequences of being wrong. And so they haven't had to cultivate the humility that comes from that. That's one of the things I loved about, like, after my car accident, or it was like really bad car accident, I almost died. I got really into like primitive survival skills, wilderness survival skills, and like was going out and doing these like primitive camping, like built a primitive shelter, learned how to make fire with sticks and stuff, and like wove baskets and like all this crazy stuff. And it was a process of like just getting back in touch with like just that which is true and real, and that refining thing. I'm like, okay, how do I contend with poison? Like, again, like, I grew up like camping and doing all this other stuff, but like not in that setting where it's like, okay, I need to learn how to deal with all of these things when I don't have a crutch here. It's just me out here. And it's like, I'm going to be out here for X amount of days on my own. I better figure out, how do I get water? Like, how do I, like, there was the process of me getting water whenever I was doing primitive overnights, like multiple overnights in a row, was like a 3-hour process sometimes of me just having enough water for the next day. And so it's like that it cultivates a thing in you where you have that direct relationship with your surroundings and your own discomfort.
Cultivates community, like real connectedness, because people that live like that rely on a community and elders, and
Sure.
knowledge is
Yeah.
passed on.
The wisdom. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not going to take you 3 hours to get water. Like, you know how to get it because somebody taught it to you. And so that bonds you to these people because you need them.
Yeah.
Do we need other people now? I do. I need real people. I
Yeah.
something Sorry.
There's very few mavericks. No, I was just going to say very few people can do it on their own. We do need other people.
Yeah, I know I need other people. The humility thing, I think ultimately, and I think people have a theory that being in nature, really being sitting and allowing nature to unfold, allows you to be more in touch with mortality. Your life is going to end. This cycle.
Yes. Yes.
And so I'm just thinking about comfort with one's mortality, the reality of that.
Mm.
And I think the inability to, or the unwillingness to think about that and contemplate it is also driving a lot of this. And that has something to do with humility too. You're gonna die. You're not actually that important.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter how much money you have or followers or whatever. Everyone's gonna die. We're all gonna die. And so that also brings, I think, people who understand that, like really understand it, been thinking about it. I've been thinking about my own mortality for most of my life, like really digging into it and thinking about it
Hmm.
and seeking stories about it and whatnot. I think maybe there might be a correlation between those people as well, because there's something especially stoking about the COVID thing, because it's like death, fear of death, this
Yep.
anxiety about getting infected. So I think mortality is in there as well. And then that brings us back to the spiritual question.
Yeah.
Mortality, you probably tend to also think more about spiritual things and
Sure.
broader. You think about life in a much broader than just in this your own generation. Like you think about, you just go way out, and then when you're in nature, you can just see it. I mean, this you can see, the moon. How long has the moon been around?
A few weeks at least.
I just noticed it last week, so
Yeah, dude.
you're telling me it's longer than that? Okay, a few weeks.
Well, I mean, dude, there are people who, I mean, when they live in these like super heavily light polluted places and then they come visit like somewhere where I'm at, where it's just like nothing but stars at night, and
Astounding.
there's no light pollution. It is, yeah, it's wild.
It's astounding. Yeah, I lived in New York City for many, many years, and it I remember lying down on a dock in the middle of a lake in a very, very rural area and in the middle of the night, and whoa, like it
Where
was
was that at?
up in Maine.
Okay.
Yeah, just that experience was really, I'll never forget it. It was just so nice. I mean, here where I'm at, I mean, I'm in Northampton. I'd have to drive out, could probably get that experience, but you're still, even if you're close to a place that has
Light
lights,
pollution's insane. Yeah.
yeah, light pollution really is a real thing. And so is
Yep.
sound pollution. I thought getting one of the things I that started to really get on me in the city was the noise, specifically sirens and honking, that kind of thing. And sometimes the trains were really loud. But one thing I appreciate about the city was my apartments were often very quiet.
Hmm.
Odd. It was like being insulated, like talking to this apartment, like surrounded by big buildings. Like it was always really quiet in my apartment. So then I moved up here, and I'm finding there's a lot of machine noises in the country for all seasons. There's leaf blowers
Yeah.
and like leaf blowers
We
and
might have different definitions of in the country, but
I don't mind the axe chopping. That's a nice sound. But usually it's
okay.
zzz.
Yep.
What's
Yep.
the definition of country?
What's my definition of country?
I'm in North.
Um, yeah. Uh, the lack of, if I can't look in any direction and see another person's house, that's really the country. If I can only see a few other people's houses, I would say that's still the country. If it's just a few, if I'm like looking around and I'm like, oh, that's my neighbor there, that's my neighbor there, that's my neighbor there. There's, a total of 30 people and 10. No, I'm not frozen.
Okay. Well, you're frozen to me.
Am I still frozen to you? Okay, now you're frozen to me. Jodi, are you there? Let's see what this looks like on YouTube, folks. Meet me on the YouTube. Jodi?
Yeah, I'm here. My internet connection is unstable. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
I'm just going to leave my camera off for a few minutes.
Sure.
You
Um,
in the country, your neighbor.
yeah, and so like I mean, that's a pretty common thing. Like where I grew up in North Central Missouri, I graduated with 43 people. And so like, you would be out, someone who lived out in the country and they could see like, oh, we have this neighbor over here and this neighbor over there. But there's maybe 30 people who live within, several square acres. And so it's not a lot. That'd be my definition of it. But I understand it's all relative. If you move from New York City, you know, almost everything outside of like somewhere in Asia is going to be like a downgrade in terms of like, metropolitan. You're like scaling down the metropolitanism of wherever you are. And so it's going to feel like country even if you move to the suburbs, and so like I get that. It's all relative. I want to before we have to bring this to a close, because I do know that probably coming up on that time, it is that I wanted to make a correction to something, or a missed opportunity that I had to map something you said from our last conversation on. So whenever we were talking, I gave that like metaphor of like, we were talking about how institutions aren't broken. They've just been like re-optimized for something else. And about how the way they've been captured, hijacked, like the way you conceptualize something that's hijacked versus something that's broken, very different.
Mm.
And about how like, if a building is broken, you go in to fix it. If it's hijacked with like heavily armed militants, you either bomb the shit out of it or you go somewhere else and develop your own base. And we were talking about your lawsuit, and I realized after we're done talking, let's come back to and listen to it. I'm like, oh, a lawsuit is the equivalent of bombing the shit out of it. That is getting like some other form of firepower and trying to assault that thing. A bombing may or may not be successful, because you can look at Vietnam. We bombed a lot of those like super underground. I mean, that's the reason why it doesn't work in like Afghanistan. They're in caves, right? And so it may or may not be successful, but it's still a thing you can do. And whenever we were talking, I did not map your lawsuit onto like, oh, that is bombing that institution and that hijacked thing and seeing what happens, seeing if it works or not. Like how thick their shell is and their defenses are will determine how successful that bombing is, right? We have, in London during World War II, the air raids, people were down in the subways and stuff. And some cases they were down deep enough. In other cases, it might cause a collapse and people died. But that's what those air raid shelters were, as a place that could sustain bombs. Houses couldn't. And so like a lawsuit's a way of determining, is this place a house or is it a shelter? Is this a place? Can they survive this bombing or not? And the more lawsuits or the more things like that there are, that's more bombings that will hopefully help compromise their defenses enough to cause them to crack. But I didn't make that connection in my mind until after we got done talking, and I realized I'm like, okay, there's actually a lot of utility that I hadn't even thought about whenever it comes to like lawsuits and like what you're doing, because it's a form of bombing and trying to get this other form of firepower to try and do something to crack the defenses of these places.
Yeah, to crack the defenses and get them to
Follow the law.
yeah, follow the law.
Yeah.
I tried, yeah, in my own way for a long time, and now I'm bringing now the law. Here comes the lawsuit.
Yeah, and that's the big guns, right? Like on our own, it's like maybe just someone with a rifle, like an infantryman, and it's like, okay, I'm not Jason Bourne. Maybe some people are Jason Bourne and they can come in and take the whole thing, but or John McClane maybe is a better one, because John McClane deals with terrorist hijacking things. So it's like, man, we're not all John McClane in Nakatomi Plaza, right? That's my location on Twitter, is Nakatomi Plaza. Um,
It is a
we're
civil.
all,
They are civilized rules of engagement, though. I will say
yep,
that lawsuit is that is the institutional, that is the method, the macro method that we have available to micro level wrongs.
yep.
The macro level
Would
is
you
appeal to the law.
Where are you at in terms of your optimism for at least the stuff with Smith? You don't have to get into the details of the lawsuit, but just like as you're looking at the case, and I know it's still kind of early.
I can't. I don't want to talk about that here.
Sure. Sorry.
I do think that nothing short of a lawsuit will. No, that's not true. If 20 people came out tomorrow at Smith College and went public, that might do something. That might do That might cause, and depending on who they are too.
Right.
Fortunately, that's part of it. If it was like 20 high level people said, I'm leaving because this place is totally poison and racist and sexist, then that might cause an actual thing to happen, up to and including the board of trustees ejecting the leadership. Of course, the
Hmm.
board of trustees problem, so you'd have to eject them as well. It's just, it's hard to. There are probably other things that could force them to follow the law, but I don't see anything less than, in my case. I guess I really tried
Yeah.
everything,
Yeah.
everything, and I actually thought it would. I thought going public. Yeah, I thought more people would go public, but I also thought surely these people have some reason left in their brain and they will understand this is not right. This is
Yeah.
morally, legally wrong what you were doing, not just to me, but to all the students, and framing it as an anti-white thing. That's also inaccurate because it's very,
Totally.
very condescending, racist, and this, to
Yeah.
assume students who are not white cannot even watch a mild-mannered middle-aged woman make a video without having to say, we are
Yeah.
here, without having to write a letter, we are here for you after that video. It's like the messages, we know it's hard and you can't do it. Again, the comfort thing, like if there's
Yeah.
any discomfort, and assuming that there's discomfort too, assuming that they know what somebody feels just because of their skin color. I won't even go down this big road, but in terms of the law, I feel good about the lawsuit. I feel
Good.
good about my I feel like I have a strong case, which is unfortunate because
Yeah.
it happened and it was painful for me. I will say that. It was a painful experience
Sure.
there. But I feel good about the suit.
That's good. It's interesting. It's not that these people, a realization that I had is it's not that these people don't have reason. It's not that they don't realize it. It's that there were and are forces
Right.
that are stronger than their adherence to reason or logic or even morality in a lot of ways. It's that self-preservation. It's like, okay, it's not that they don't see it, it's that they know that if they choose that thing, they're compromising their career, they're compromising their social relationships, they're compromising their comfort, and not just necessarily in an unimportant way. Like they're compromising their material comfort. It's like, okay, you know what? I have a mortgage, I have kids, so it's like I have things I have to think about that are more important. Is how these people think about it. And so it's just like we didn't see those forces. We thought that it was just enough, that truth was enough, doing the right thing was enough.
Well,
And
I
we
thought
didn't see these countervailing forces that are pushing so much harder on them.
yeah, so a lawsuit is in essence, a successful lawsuit is a reminder to people that the law is something that must be followed. That
Yeah. Yeah.
your all these feelings and things there, you're not above the law,
Hmm.
no matter
Yep.
what. So
Exactly.
that's what I meant when I was talking about the law. Like, how is the law still applicable? We're going to find out.
Yep.
I think it is. I
Does it
think
still have the the weight?
I think the civil rights law is very, very, very important, critical, and important to our. Yeah. So I think it's an important case, and
Good.
I feel I have a strong case.
Good.
They
It's
didn't.
simultaneous.
It's pretty
You do
egregious.
have a strong case.
Did.
Yeah. It's simultaneously encouraging and discouraging to see. Remember you mentioned like if 20 people, right? 20 people. It's encouraging and discouraging to see how few people would be required, but then you look and say, we can't even get that few of people to do this.
Yeah.
It gives you hope, but it also at the same time is like, we can't get just 5 people. Like, really? Like, is it that?
That would be a
Yeah.
lot. That'd be good.
Yeah. Like that. I mean, that's how there was a woman yesterday at church comes up to me and says, hey, because I've seen her at me and my buddy went to these like county Republican meetings just to try and get some support against the school district. It's like that was a whole other experience. It was totally wild because I'm like, I never thought I'd be at some like Republican meeting. This is, I like them a little more than the Democrats, not a lot more, but a little more. And so, and she was like, hey, why don't you run for school board? And I said, because there's 5 seats up right now in my county that are going to be up for reelection, which that's a majority. There's 9 people on our school board. And I
Wow.
said, if you can get me 4, I said I would need 4 other people who would agree to these mandates. Superintendent's going to go. This principal's going to go. We're going to not going to do mass mandates anymore. These are the things and they would have to agree to that. And she was like, oh, well, maybe this one lady. And it's like, exactly. You can think of maybe one person who would be on board with that. Like these very simple, like pretty straightforward, necessary things. And it's like, oh, we probably couldn't even get 4 other people who would be on board with that. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. That's why I would not run. That's why I wouldn't do it. Unless I had 4 people who in writing on film said, yeah, this is what we're here to do. We're
Yeah.
going to do these things. That's it. And they wouldn't do it because it would be too costly socially in the community to do that. So Jodi, this has been awesome. Is there any other like final thoughts or
Pressing issue.
things that are, yeah, or just things that are, making you smile lately, or anything you just want to share with people, to kind of give them something and on a bit of a high note, maybe some of that art, like what's been some of that like Beethoven you've been listening to, or what are the things you've been engaging with that fill your cup?
I have discovered through another individual the music of Lawrence Fox.
Okay. I don't know
And
who that is.
well, I knew who Lawrence Fox was because I knew that he created the Reclaim Party in England. And
Okay.
he changed the name. It's like the UK something for culture party or something, but it was originally the Reclaim Party. And he ran for mayor of London, I believe, this year
Okay.
and lost. So I knew about this person. I follow him on Twitter. I'm like, that's really cool. Like he's creating like good for him. And then I was at an event recently because I'm doing a lot more. I'm getting a lot more local now. I'm in person stuff. And this person played me a song of his. And there's been a lot of fires in my life lately. A
Okay.
lot of fires. Like we were sitting by a fire. And
Yeah.
he played the song, and it was so beautiful. And it was about this. It's called The Distance. Like if we're gonna go, I need your hand in this resistance. If we're gonna go the distance, and it was about
Hmm.
the light. The light has dimmed on the age of reason. It was it's a duet he does with this woman, and I don't know who she is. I keep meaning to look her up, but the whole album is just so beautiful. It's called A Grief Observed is the album.
Hmm.
And I was like, when he was like, "Do you know Lawrence Fox?" And I'm like, "Isn't that the guy, the Reclaim Party?" And he was like, "Yeah, I don't know anything about that. He's an actor. He also does music." And I'm like, "I wonder if." And then I heard this song. I'm like, "I think that might be the same guy." Like, what are the chances there's 2 Lawrence Foxes and one's
Right.
an artist, one's like a politician, and it's the same guy? It's so
Wow.
cool. He's so cool. So
Okay.
I've been
Lawrence Fox.
Lawrence Fox, and it's Laurence Fox.
I'm going to
Only contemporary.
correct how I wrote that.
Yeah, and I've been discovering making a lot of in-person local connections with people who are on the same page, and I think that's been life-changing for me and given
Sure.
me that's the white pill for me.
There you
And
go.
so it's a shit storm out there. Like that I'm not going to be alone in this.
Yeah. Like you said, community is very often quite literally a shelter from that storm. You know, the right community.
Uh,
The wrong community is the storm.
yeah, yeah. You want a community that's not going to stone you to death.
Correct. Unless you're screwing up, in which case you want them to threaten to stone you to death and get you back into shape. This is awesome, Jodi. Where can people find you? And if anyone's watching this and doesn't know where to find you or follow your work, like which I think they should do, I strongly suggest it. Both of your YouTube channels. Okay, where can people find you?
Yeah, I mean, my YouTube channel, just Google Jodi Shaw YouTube. It'll come up. All those videos will come up. I have a website if you want to know more about the Smith situation. I've been a little
Okay.
kind of moving off on the online stuff. I'm getting more
Okay.
in-person stuff, but it's jodishaw.net. There's also
Okay.
jodishaw.com, which is my music website. It's a very understated website. And then I have a network that I'm working on called Integrity Matters, integritymatters.org.
Uh,
That's still I'm still figuring that out. That's been a journey because certain things have happened and since I started it, and so I'm navigating what is the best thing to do on a rapidly shifting landscape. Let's put it that way.
yeah.
So jodishaw.com, just Google, you'll find me. You'll find all the bad
.com for the music, .net for the Smith stuff, Twitter at Smith Surge.
at Smith_Surge. Yes.
Okay.
And then I'm
All
on
right.
Bandcamp too. Jodi Shaw Bandcamp. That's my music.
Okay. Bandcamp. I was like, I don't know what that is outside of the American Pie line. The famous what?
Oh, Bandcamp, right. She
This one
goes
time at Bandcamp? Yeah. Get out of here with that.
the flute player.
Underrated. Yeah. Um, I think there is underlying interesting classic traditional ethics baked into movies like that and super bad even, and like there is, and like Knocked Up, it's weird how even in like super like raunchy movies and art even from today has like traditional ethics baked into it. Like every single time a person pursues like all of this, the world will tell you do this, like bang as many people's spot or whatever will make you happy, it never makes the person happy. Like in all of these things, every time they do that, every time they try to do these things, it never makes them. So I think there's some interesting like unconscious wisdom baked into some of those movies. Anyway, that's a whole nother topic.
Wow.
um
Yeah, you're right. It's always kind
watch
of it's
watch Knocked Up. Why doesn't she get an abortion? Why does he propose to her? Watch
yeah.
Super Bad. Like they both think like, Jonah Hill, oh, I'll get drunk and she's like, actually, I don't drink. And Michael Cera has an opportunity to hook up with this girl when she's all drunk, and he's like, actually, I don't want to do this. I just want to get to know you.
Yeah, I'm thinking, well, maybe cultures they're just telling us to have these values, but no, you're right. It's those values are there for probably if it for a reason. I'm thinking about the unbearable lightness of being right now. That
Huh.
book. Uh God,
Who's that by?
Milo, no, maybe that's not it.
Yiannopoulos. Okay.
Milo, where are you? We need you.
Milo Yiannopoulos or the
Yeah,
other Milo? Oh,
Milo, oh, I mean, I'm such a fan. I am a fan.
Daddy.
Fascinating.
He is an interesting character.
A
He's kind
liar.
of one like who's that French guy? Stefan Molyneux, where it's like there are people who, you have to learn how to sort out some of the batshit things people say from like the things they say that are insightful. It's like people are complicated. Like if you can sort
But also,
art from the artist, like you
he,
have to be able to sort
yeah, like
good
maybe
ideas from
that
bad
is the
ideas.
art. Like he's not
Yeah,
saying anything complicated or like
totally.
or accurate or
Yeah.
he's just enjoying the presence of
It's like
somebody.
Alex Jones. I think Alex Jones is like that. I think Alex Jones is like that in a lot of ways too. Like it's
Really?
performative, and it's like,
Huh. Yeah.
well, it's like, why is Joe Rogan such good friends with Alex Jones? It's like for a reason, it's for
Fun.
a reason. Sure, he's probably a shit ton of fun.
I
So
bet
it's,
Milo Yiannopoulos is a shit ton of fun too.
he probably is actually, to be honest with you,
That's important. Playing and fun. Important things. We don't give them enough credit. Maybe because we're
because
not
you have to be vulnerable to
do that.
play. You have to be authentic to do it, and you have to be vulnerable. You put yourself out there when you play.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. I'm gonna stop the live stream. Thank you everyone for watching. You guys are awesome. Please go check out Jodi Shaw's stuff. Her music and her content, like the video on Anchors, is amazing. That's not the only one. There's a lot of them. And her locals, jodishaw.locals.com. She has a
Local.
locals community. She does Zoom calls with her community as well. So go and follow her in all those places. Jodi, this has been awesome. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure.